All right, welcome back once again. This is Dave Tenney, and I'm
and
John
that's Johnny
Swano,
Swano.
and we are Two Beards in a Bible. Thanks for joining in. We're going to pick up at Acts chapter 6 at verse 8, and I think it's Dave's turn to read.
I'll go and read to the end of the chapter. It says, "And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. Then there arose some from what is called the synagogue of the freedmen, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, and those from Cilicia and Asia, disputing with Stephen. And they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. Then they secretly induced men to say, 'We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and God.' And they stirred up the people, the elders and the scribes, and they came upon him, seized him, and brought him to the council. They also set up false witnesses who said, 'This man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs which Moses delivered to us.' And all who sat in the council, looking steadfastly at him, saw his face as the face of an angel." That's when they knew, they should have known, that whatever they were going to do was not the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's kind of a... There's a lot of things that you read in there that make me think of, the things that I hear about in the news today. When there are those that are set out to do evil things, they'll lie, cheat, and steal to make the good look bad.
Yeah.
And what is that? Woe to them that call evil good and good evil.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing here. It's
Don't you talk about my government.
well, there's whether it's people today or people then, nothing's changed. I mean, this reads like something that could happen today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
At any point in history.
So we've got this man who is most likely a Hellenist. Mm-hmm. And we can know that because later on, as we read, the words that he uses in his speech are Greek references to Hebrew things. So we're like 99% sure that of these, plus, as we read last episode, he was one of the seven that were appointed to take care of the needs of the neglected widows. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to another thought I just had. Do you think that these 7 men were deacons? Have you ever heard anybody say that?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, they would be doing what would be considered to be the work of deacons, to take care of the day-to-day issues that would arise among the church, among the brethren. The deacons are really, the ones that would be doing the visiting and the tending to the needs of the saints. Oftentimes, it's not that it's not something the elders should do, but it's something that is usually, it seems like today, it's usually squarely put on the shoulders of, the preacher and the elder, and the elders. So I think that they basically would be, whether we don't see that designation here.
I think they were not deacons, but in the sense that when you read in Timothy and Titus, where there's qualifications for deacons given, but of course deacon just means servant. Mm-hmm. But
there is no mention of the qualifications,
and there's no mention of elders either.
Right.
So I think these 7 men, my view is these 7 men that were appointed was a special case. Mm-hmm. Just in the extreme early parts of the church, and they were doing this service.
Right.
But it seems like it was just one service that they were doing.
Yeah, and in keeping with, we can have our thoughts as to whether or not, they're doing the work of a deacon, but we just don't see, we don't read it here.
Right.
We don't read the rest of what you pointed out, the qualifications being met. It just basically says to choose from among you.
Yeah.
And that's, there could have been, but
Yeah.
but again, that's again one of those things that, it's not a test of
Right.
fellowship,
No, not at all.
with belief there. But so I can be.
You could go either way.
I could, yeah. I mean, I see that they're doing some of the work of of the deacons,
They are, and I see that too.
But we always have to keep in mind that we can't read, and it's so easy to read beyond what
Exactly.
what is written.
It doesn't say that.
Yeah, so we shouldn't either.
Yeah, I just brought that up because that's a thing I've heard. But when I'm studying, I go, well, you can say that, but the Bible doesn't say that.
Yeah, it's slightly out of context.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Okay, so Stephen is one of these guys. He's full of faith and power, and he did great wonders and signs among the people. So he's obviously got some gifts given to him through the laying on of hands of the apostles, and he can obviously heal people or whatever these signs, and that's generally kind of what they were. Mm-hmm. He's doing these things. And then there's these fellows who come from the synagogue of the freedmen, and in the King James it says the libertines. But apparently there were multiple synagogues in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
not just one.
Right.
And this particular synagogue, and a synagogue is, I think, just basically like a group of Jewish people who meet in a place to study the old law, more or less. Kind of like a church service, but not quite. And these guys were all men who had been freed from prison.
Oh, okay.
So that's what the libertines are, the freedmen. So that's who these people were.
Huh.
They were all people who had been in prison and were freed from prison.
That's interesting. Never heard that before.
Yeah.
So that's so does that mean that they weren't welcome in the other groups because they were?
I don't know. Or they just bunched up because they all had this, like, maybe they had I mean, from what I've read about prison back then, it wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
So they may have had this, like, horrible thing in common.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes people,
It happens today.
yeah. I think of AA.
Yeah.
People who are alcoholics. And
Yeah.
there was a fella that I worked with for years, and he, as far as I know, he's probably still attending AA meetings.
Yeah.
Like that's what he would do on Saturday night.
Whatever it is, even those that have been to war, sometimes it's helpful. A lot of times it's helpful for them to get together with others that understand what they went through.
Yeah.
Because people that haven't been there, it's not the same. You can't quite commiserate and console a person through something that you have no idea what they're.
Right.
It's at least not as effectively. So
Yeah.
So maybe that was the idea there.
Yeah, who knows? But whatever they were upset with Stephen. I could tell you that much.
Well, I just learned that. I probably never would have dug into that idea of the freedmen and figured that out. So I learned something from you.
Well, that's the kind of things that bug me when I read the Bible. I'm like, what is that? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, well, that's good. You get into it, and I'm obviously one that can be guilty of this. You get into reading, and there's so many details that you just miss. And that's the thing that we've said it before, that the more times you read this, you catch on to something else that takes you down a rabbit hole, if you will, but you learn something else that kind of holds the story together even more.
The Bible's a lot deeper than people give it credit for.
It is, yeah.
I mean, it's a world history book.
Yeah.
And it is just it's just really deep in its writing, or it can be really simple as well. But he says they were disputing with Stephen, but they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. So whatever they said to him, it's probably just like the Pharisees arguing with Jesus.
You can't fight the truth.
Yeah.
I mean,
They couldn't resist it.
Yeah.
So, since they can't win the argument, now what are they going to do?
Yeah. And that's where it plays just like any soap opera or political fight today. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they secretly induced men in verse 11 to say, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and God." And that's a whole. We'll get into that. I don't want to give away too much of what's coming up, but the whole idea that they started to accuse him of blaspheming against Moses and God.
Yeah, which
there's
is
so
ridiculous.
much irony there.
Yeah, there is. There is. He says that they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes, and they came upon him and seized him and brought him to the council. So this is probably the Sanhedrin Council, I would imagine. And just like with Jesus, they set up false witnesses. There's a lot of parallels between this and Jesus' trial as well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. So they said, this man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this holy place, which is the temple, and the law. And of course, the temple was a really... the Jews were really touchy about the temple. They still believe that's where God dwelt. Well, this is after the temple curtain had been torn. God was not dwelling in the temple at this point.
Right.
They may not have realized that.
Right. Yeah, they didn't want to.
I mean, they should have known when the gigantic 9-story tall curtain between the holy place and the Holy of Holies was torn in half when Jesus was crucified on the cross. They should have realized maybe something had happened.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make any sense, but apparently they didn't.
Yeah.
And it says, he says, "For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs which Moses delivered us." The fact that they call Jesus Jesus of Nazareth is almost like a slam.
Yeah. Yeah, right, because that was not the neighborhood to be from, right?
Wasn't they? And Jesus wasn't. They're not claiming they're claiming he's Jesus, the Christ.
This Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah, there's something to that.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. This. I just can't help but think of a time prior to coming to the Lord's Church. We were involved with a group, and as we were learning, my family and I were learning the scriptures and studying, and we came to realize that there were some things being done that just were not biblical, and we brought it to the attention of the quote unquote elders of this group, and basically we're told we don't care. And one of them actually took me into a room and basically threatened me and tried to strong arm me into not bringing the issue before the congregation. And I just can't help but think of situations like that unfortunately happen
even today
within groups of people that claim Christ.
Right.
And it's a matter of, going back here to verse 11, the fact that they had to secretly induce men to say things, they're getting to the end of their rope and they just don't know what to do with them. So they're resorting to things that they might not otherwise get themselves involved in, but they're so desperate. And I don't think we can even fully do justice to the idea of how desperate these people are.
Oh yeah, they were
right here.
They were going out of their minds at this point.
Yeah.
And it's because I think too is, if you reflect back on all the things that have happened, especially in the last like 3.5, 4 years,
Yeah.
from the start of Jesus's ministry to this point. I mean, their world has been turned upside down.
Right.
And now, as we read before, some of the priests are defecting
Right.
and becoming Christians. They're losing members. There's people at the synagogue and people at the temple huge crowds gathering around the apostles.
Yeah.
And they can see their power slipping away.
Right. And the fact that they even, came upon him and seized him and brought him to the council. I mean, can you imagine that happening? I mean, who do they think they are?
Right.
That
Exactly.
that they can take a hold of a person, and the way that I read that, it's a forcible, seizing him. They're making him go before this group of people.
But don't think that couldn't happen today.
Right. Right.
Because it could.
Right. Well, I mean, we see that. We've seen that over and over throughout history with various governments. But I'm specifically, can you imagine that happening in the church? Somebody getting so full of themselves that they would seize people and have them brought before. I mean, that is just
it's anti-Christian to do that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and being that these people are supposed to be of the same God, it really. You just think about that for a minute. Think about what they're doing.
I can see those that. There are people who are fanatical about the environment, or fanatical about sexuality, and I can see people that are like that being this way.
Yeah.
And I've seen that before.
Sure.
And I've seen, there are some like far right-wing Christian groups that are this way too.
Right.
I can't think about that one, some Baptist church, and they go and like spit on soldiers, do a terrible, terrible thing. Those people are not Christians.
It's far beyond the scope of
Yeah.
what you can find in the scriptures.
Yeah.
If they believe that they're doing the Lord's work, I mean,
Yeah.
where do you find any example
Right.
of that?
You never find that.
Yeah.
So here they are all. There's Stephen's in here, and they're looking at him, and they see he has the face of an angel, which I can only imagine it has some sort of supernatural radiance. That's what I wrote under there, because I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't have my I have a little note in here. Is that literal or is that a figurative statement? Is it Zur, if I remember correctly, says that they believe that he spoke with such a fervency as an angel would, being a messenger from God, which is what an angel is, a messenger. So that he spoke with such fervency and such a command of the word of God that they saw him in that way as speaking as with such authority. But I have to wonder if it isn't something like you were mentioning there, that there was something about his presence that let them know that this guy is something special here.
I was thinking about, when a woman gets pregnant, women, they glow. I don't know how to describe that, but I've seen that over and over. Their face has a glow to it, and I think maybe that was this, but times 10.
Yeah. So it kind of in line with what Zur was saying, that that there's such a fervency in the way that he was bringing this thing across, that it showed that he was that there was a difference here. And either way, it is again, this would be a good place for them to just stop.
Remember when Moses saw God's back,
Yeah.
and then his face shone.
Yeah.
And they couldn't, like, nobody
Yeah.
could look at it.
Yeah, and that you can't help but think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
In this particular instance.
Absolutely. What are we doing on time here, Johnny? Oh, 20 minutes. Okay, so we can start getting into this a little bit. I think this is going to take a few episodes to get through this. So this is Stephen's address before the Sanhedrin, which is, to me, this is one of the most awesome things in the entire Bible. Like this is just off the hook,
Yeah.
right? The whole chapter 7 of Acts is just incredible. So, will you read through 1 through 8? We'll talk about that, and then we're going to be done.
Okay. So chapter 7 at verse 1. Then the high priest said, "Are these things so?" And he said, "Brethren and fathers, listen. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran, and said to him, 'Get out of your country and from your relatives, and come to a land that I will show you.' Then he came out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran, and from there, when his father was dead, he moved him to this land in which you now dwell. And God gave him no inheritance in it, not even enough to set his foot on. But even when Abraham had no child, he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his descendants after him. But God spoke in this way, that his descendants would dwell in a foreign land, and that they would bring them into bondage and oppress them 400 years. And the nation to whom they will be in bondage I will judge, said God, and after that they shall come out and serve me in this place. He gave him the covenant of circumcision, and so Abraham begot Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day, and Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot the 12 patriarchs.
Okay. So, first the high priest asked Stephen, if these things are true, and rather than saying yes or no, he starts way back with the start of the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
Which started with Abraham. So, Abraham would be the first Jew, right? They called the nation of Israel Jews because of Jerusalem. I think it's just like a nickname.
Right.
I can't think of any other. I've never come across any other thing where it explains where Jew name came from, other than it's just short for one who comes from Jerusalem.
Right.
He says the glory of God appeared to our father Abraham. So how did he appear to Abraham? Remember?
Go
I'm thinking of Moses.
Yeah,
you're
thinking of the burning bush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He just appeared to Abraham, I guess, in a vision or in a dream.
Yeah.
And he told him to get out of the land. And did Abraham do that right away? I don't think he did.
I don't think so.
I think he waited until his father passed away. And
Well, yeah, and it says, I guess it says, and from there when his father died, he moved him to this land. Yeah.
So he moved him, and Abraham moves to the land of Israel, but it's not owned by Israel. So he has no place in it.
Right.
He just has this promise that this land that he's going to go to is going to be given to his descendants.
Right.
So that was, I guess, what we call the land promise. Right? And as we go through this, we see that promise that God made to Abraham was fulfilled.
Right.
Because the Israelites eventually do get that land.
Right.
Now there were some, I guess, some requirements, some stipulations that they had to keep that land, and the big one was, they had to follow God's commandments.
Right.
They were supposed to drive out all the foreign people, but they didn't do that.
Right.
So really, it's interesting when you see the nation of Israel start to take over the land of their inheritance. they don't even follow God's commandments when they do that.
How quickly mankind loses sight of those things, and that's a never-ending cycle, it seems.
Yeah.
That, within a few generations, people forget what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, they didn't even, God said, drive all the nations out of this land, but they didn't do that.
Right.
And that caused them all kinds of problems down the road if you study the Old Testament.
yeah. Now, going back to Stephen here, why do you think he started out with this history lesson? They knew these things already, right?
Yeah. To remind them?
Yeah, and I think it gives him. He's telling them, okay, you're telling me that I'm telling you false things. Well, let me let you know that I know how this happened, and these people would have known this like the back of their hands.
Yeah.
The priests and so on that he's talking to, and the council, and so he's affirming to them that I know these things. Let's not forget. This is how this went down. And he's leading them down a path that, as you said, it's just beautiful. When he gets to the end of this, and his convicting statements there at the end of this address are just, they're perfect.
Yeah.
You just couldn't craft a better grouping of words to just cut to the heart.
Yes, absolutely.
In fact, we'll read later on that they were cut to the heart.
Yeah. They were. Yeah. So he says that he said when his father was dead, he moved him to this land which you now dwell in. God gave him no inheritance in him, not even enough to set his foot on. But even when Abraham had no child, he promised to give it to him for a possession and his descendants after him. So God makes this promise to Abraham that he's going to get this land and he's going to go to his descendants. But the problem is Abraham has no descendants to be given to. And I think all of this stuff just speaks to the faith of Abraham.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's what I think that's this part of it. So we're just pointing out that Abraham had this great faith in this promise that God made him.
And Abraham never really lost his faith.
No.
There is the whole idea of Sarah trying to bring things.
Oh well, that too. Well, and he did lie about her being his wife.
Yeah.
But he was a man. He wasn't God.
Right.
And I think sometimes that stuff's put in the Bible just so we can see that Abraham was not perfect.
Yeah, and even this little section here that we're reading about him not even having a place for, what does it say, where it doesn't even have a place to put his foot.
Yeah.
Not even enough to set his foot on. Even though he was maybe lowly in the wealth of the world as it can be seen, there still was that promise there.
Yeah.
There still was that promise, and God was good with his promise, and he followed through with it. Yeah. And today, we have a promise if we are in Christ. And although we may feel like our life's not going exactly like we think it should, we still have that promise.
Right, and God also, Stephen doesn't address this, but God also addressed Abraham and promised him that in his seed, all of the world would be blessed.
Right.
And that came about through Christ. You can follow that right through. So this promise gets passed on to Abraham's son Isaac, and it gets passed on to Isaac's son Jacob. And so he talks then about his descendants would dwell in a foreign land. And of course, that's Egypt. And that came about through Joseph. And does he talk about Joseph in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. So
that's coming up.
We won't talk a whole lot about Joseph right now. So that's what he's talking about there. The nation that was in bondage, that's Egypt. And then God said, he says, and the nation to whom you will be in bondage, I will judge, said God. And after that, they shall come out and serve me in this place. And if you think about Israel leaving Egypt, God, basically the Israelites came out of Egypt with all of the wealth of Egypt because of the 10 plagues.
Yeah. And all of those things played out. And the I just had a thought here. It might have just escaped me. The 12 patriarchs.
Yeah.
What did that turn into? That's the tribes.
Yeah,
the tribes of
the 12
Israel.
tribes,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, absolutely. And those are the sons of Jacob. People wonder why there's 13. There were 13 tribes in Israel, and that's because Joseph. There is no tribe of Joseph. There was a tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, and those were Joseph's sons. So Joseph got a double portion. And he says, then he gave them the covenant of circumcision. So that was a physical thing that showed that this male was a Jew. It was an outward sign of their Jewishness. So that's what that was. Of course, if you look at Genesis chapter 17, it'll tell you all about that, how that was to be done. And then it just says, so Abraham begot Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot the 12 patriarchs.
Yeah.
So where are we at here, Johnny? Oh, we're overtime. Good.
All right.
So
Well, then we'll save Joseph for the next one.
yes.
And thanks for joining in. This is Two Beards in a Bible. We'll see you next time.